In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to make a simple app I'm calling UpperDowner. And really, it just has two buttons and a number. And you can use the plus button to increase the number and the minus button to decrease the number. And sure, it'll go negative right now. Where we're going with this, we're going to actually use these numbers. There'll be more buttons like this in the later apps to change the color of some elements on the screen. But in order to do that, we need to do like baby steps so that you can get started at the most basic. So this is what you should have at the end of this video tutorial. I'm going to make the assumption that you already know how to set up an emulator in your IDE. I'm using Eclipse, so you could use Android Studio. And I'm hoping that maybe you've already made your first app by following a tutorial. The textbook that we use in class is the Big Nerd Ranch Android Guide. And we're going to be using page, what page is this? I think it's page 13 out of the book. You begin by going to File, New, Android Application Project. And I'm going to call this one UpperDowner. And to get a package name, I'm going to put com.moixland because my web address is moixland.com. And to simplify this, if I use a minimum SDK of 16, that will allow me to avoid using any of the support libraries which allow for older Android apps to use this. Absolutely, you would want to use the support libraries if you're making a production app, but this is just a tutorial and I want to make it as simple as possible. So I'm setting my minimum to 16 to avoid having to use any of those support libraries. I don't want to take time to make a custom icon for this app, so I'm unchecking that box. And I want to create an activity with a blank activity. Now, some versions of Eclipse will give you a fragment, and there's a video that I've made to remove that fragment. My version of Eclipse does not do that. So you want to start with just an activity and not a fragment. We'll talk about what fragments mean later in the course. Activity name, I'm going to call this up-down activity, and it automatically gives me a layout name, and then I hit finish. You want to watch along the left-hand side here and make sure that your layout has an activity and not a fragment. And if it does say fragment there, then you need to remove that. Okay, so our app is built in three parts. It's built in the layout, which is the XML, which stands for Extensible Markup Language, that lays out the view that the people see. It has its values over here where strings live. And these strings are all the words and phrases that will be displayed on the screen. And the third part is source, which is the Java source code, and you use these triangles to open up in the Package Explorer, and you can get the source code. So this is where the coding goes. This is where the text that the users see on the screen would go. And this is where we set up the layout. I'm going to highlight this and hit play and make sure that my program actually builds and runs on my emulator, and I would recommend you do the same thing. So we're waiting for it to launch this, and we should expect to see UpperDowner and Hello World. My advice is to always make sure that your code is in a stable spot so that you can get an app that works. And as soon as you see red marks, back up and see what you did differently than what I did. Those red marks will indicate that there's been something typed wrong. So if you see red marks, stop right there. Don't go further. The further you go with an error, the harder it is to unwind and debug. Okay, so we have our hello world. It is functional. So I'm going to highlight not all of that. For sure, not all of that. I'm going to highlight on this code over here with Command A and delete it. And then I'm going to use that page from our book, Figure 110, to help lay out this app. So we're going to have a linear layout, which basically means all the things on our screen go up and down. And the things that we have will be a text view where I'm going to put instructions, and then a linear layout that has, in theirs it has two buttons. Ours will have two buttons with some text in the middle. So we type linear layout by going linear layout, and the IDE, the Integrated Development Environment, wants to help us out. And so what goes in there? XML ns :Android equals, and then there's this web address that's http://schemas.android.com /apk/res/android. And that says all of the code in this file will adhere to the Android XML namespace. Now we have layout width, layout height, gravity, and orientation. Android layout width equals, and how are we doing this? We're matching parent for this one. So Android width equal match parent. Android layout height equal match parent. Android gravity is center and orientation is vertical. When you see that it's suggesting things, you know you're on the right track, because at least it's making recommendations that make sense. Now, when I hit the greater than symbol, it automatically provided me this closed linear layout. One of my recommendations is always take advantage of what the IDE is doing for you, and don't delete that closed linear layout. Just let it happen, and then go inside and edit within. So we have a linear layout, and then we're going to add a text view and then another linear layout. So we have a text view, and the properties of it will be layout width, layout height, padding, and text. And the width is going to be wrap content, I believe. Yes, wrap content. The Android layout height should be wrap content. The padding is 24 dp. And the text is going to be a string. And the string they have is question text, but we're actually going to put instructions. Instructions text. Now note that when I closed the linear layout, I used just the greater than symbol. When I'm closing the text view, I use a / and a greater than symbol. That's because I don't have a closing text view element. The text view closes all by itself. Looking at the graphical layout tab, if I hit save, looking at the graphical layout tab, you'll see that I have a screen with this here, and it says I can't resolve the resource string instructions text, and that's because I don't have a string called instructions text. I can make one though. There I've said use the buttons to adjust the value, and I did Command S for save, and then back on my XML, now it displays my text. Use the buttons to adjust the value. Perfect. Now I just need to make another linear layout and some properties about it. Also, I'm copying from the Big Nerd Ranch book. This one is going to be wrap content for its layout width and height, and its orientation will be horizontal. And there's our included close tag. Save. Now what it's going to, if I hit save, it's going to give me this warning. It says it's useless because you have no content. The content that I'm going to put in there is, in the book we have 2 buttons, but in the app that I'm actually going to run I have 2 buttons and then another text view in between. So let's do our first button. And what do we need to know about that button? We need an Android layout width and a height which match the match parent, wrap content. Android layout width equal wrap content. Android layout height equal wrap content, and we need Android text equal @string, and this is going to be a minus button, so we're going to put minus label and hit save and see how that works out. Looking at the graphical layout, we have a button that would have a minus label. So I can fix that by going to my strings, and just like I added a string before, I can say string name equal minus label, and just put a minus sign. Save it. Now I have a button with a minus sign on it. While I'm in my strings, I'm going to do the same thing for the plus label. And while I'm in my XML, I'm going to do the same thing for my plus button. Lazy people copy and paste. And then just change the label to plus label. Looking good. And then in between here, I'm going to put my text view where I should end up having my value. And I can copy the properties of this text view and type them down here. Android layout width equal wrap content. Android layout height equal wrap content. Android padding is equal to 24 dp. And then the text that goes in this text view is equal to a string, which I'm going to call 0, and I need to go make that string. Now, it looks like what we're after. We can test it by highlighting the project name and hitting the play button. And watching down here, it shows what's going on. And you can bring up the emulator and see how it looks. There we go. None of these buttons do anything because we haven't wired them up yet. But for sure, we're on the right track. So I would edit, not the XML. It looks like our layout's pretty fixed. We would edit the Java code. Now, all of the behavior happens in onCreate, but we need some things above onCreate up here to represent the components that we need. So one thing we need is an integer, which I'm going to call mValue, which is the value that we're going to be adjusting, that number that lives in the middle. We also need two text views, well, one text view, text view, mValue text view, which is going to be the place where we display the value. Now, if you just type text view with a capital T to capital V, it's going to give you a red mark, and it says, I've never heard of such. So you have to do Command-Shift-O to optimize your imports, and doing so will import the widget for text view. We're also going to make two buttons. Button, M down button, M up button. And it does the same thing with button. It says, I've never heard of that. Command-Shift-O will do that there. If you're using Android Studio, you can do Option-Enter, and that optimizes your imports. So no red marks, no more tiers, good. Now, in our onCreate is where we need to set some things up. So we need to start out by saying mValue is initially 0. And then we need to connect our XML elements to our Java elements. We're going to say mValue text view dot is equal to a text view that we get by find view by ID of r.id dot. Uh-oh. This is where we ought to see r.id dot, you know what? We didn't label these things. This makes sense. So we're going to have to pause here and go add some labels. So how did we do that? Well, in the Android book, we added Android :ID statements to label all of these elements. So that's our thing. So which of these things need to stay the same? Instructions can stay the same, so it doesn't need a label. But our buttons, for sure, if we're going to manipulate them in Java, we need to go Android :ID equals quote at plus ID slash, and then the name we want to give this button. I'm going to call this up button. Save. I'm going to do the same thing for this one, Android :ID equal quote at plus ID slash. I'm going to call this, this one is the up button. This one is the down button. Am I crazy? I'm crazy. Down button, because it has the minus label. Up button, because it has the plus label. And let's call this Android :ID equal quote at plus ID slash. We're going to call this value text view. Now, if I go back to Java, r.id. Now these things exist, and I can talk about them. So I'm setting the value text view to the value text view that I made in the XML. Semicolon. I should have no red marks. Perfect. And then I can say up button equals a button that I get by going find view by ID of r.id. And then which one of these is our up button? It's that one right there. Semicolon. I'm going to leave some space and do down button is equal to the button that I get by going find view by ID of r.id. And I should find my down button. So there we go. These statements tie the Java components to the XML components so they can work together. And this find view by ID is the glue that binds those. Now the text view by itself, that's pretty much done. But we need to put some code in that tells the up button what to do when it's pressed. And you do that by saying up button dot set on click listener. And then we replace this placeholder here, this L, inside the parentheses with a new, N-E-W, view with a capital V, dot on click listener. It's the one with the capital O, capital C, capital L. And it puts in all this code for us that wasn't there before. And essentially, whatever you type here under the to do will happen when you press the up button. So what I want to do is increase the value. Value equal value plus 1. There's a red mark here because I don't have a semicolon, which I need. So now I've bound my button, and then I set my on-click listener to this block of code here that says increase the value. I'm going to save this and show you what actually happens in this moment. And it's not going to be what you expect. We would expect to see the value on the screen go up because we have told the up button to add one. But when I look in the emulator and I push my up button, it doesn't change what's on the screen. In the background, in the computer's memory, this value, this M value is in fact changing, but we never did tell it to update the display to reflect that. So we also have to say M value text view dot set text to some words, some text. I mean, we could set it to boo if we wanted to, and I'll show you that running. Launching. So now when I press my up button, I would expect this to change to the word boo, and it does. So this line tells that text view what to display. But what we actually need to display is not the word boo. What we need to display is mValue. Except there's a problem that I cannot just directly show a number value in a text field. I have to use a helper called integer.toString to turn that number value into text that can be displayed in a text view. So integer.toString value puts that in a text view. If I push my plus button, now it goes up. We need to do something similar to make the down button take it down. And we do that using the mDown button that we created. So just like we did for the up button, we set the mDown button's onClick listener to a new onClick listener program to decrease the value and update the value text view. mDown button dot set onClick listener. We're going to replace that L placeholder with a new view.onClickListener. When I double click this, it's going to fill in a whole bunch of code for us. And all that generated code is what we need to put these two lines in. mValue equals, and I'll show you a shortcut here. You can just say minus minus. It's the same thing as saying mValue is equal to mValue minus 1. And similarly, plus plus would be the same thing as mValue equal to mValue plus 1. Those are interchangeable. And then we need to do exactly this line, lazy man copy and paste. And in the next version of this code, we're actually going to write a method that we don't have to copy and paste. We just get to call. So I'm going to hit save, and it has a red mark because we need a semicolon there. And now, if we make sure the right stuff's highlighted and we run it, we should have our desired product, which allows us to increase and decrease the value. There's increasing the value, there's decreasing the value, and as in the preview, we can go into the negative and back into the positive. Now, in the next version of this, we're actually going to use this number to change the background color to different shades of gray. In Android, or actually in the computer coloring schemes, there are actually 255 different shades of gray. So that's what we'll be up to next. So if you can get here, you're well on your way to making our up and down app.